Please take your seats.
Madam Moderator, the comfort tent, the comfort tent still has plenty of bottled water for the citizens. At your convenience.
So 2 things before we begin. First, I want to give a big thanks to WestfordCAT for their continuing duty in bringing us our news. And secondly, there is bottled water in the comfort tent if anybody needs any, but please don't go up there during a vote. Okay, we'll start again with Article 13. Article 13 is a request to clarify the Memorandum of Understanding between the town and WestfordCAT. Jody, were you going to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I wasn't sure if Ray was here to speak or not. Ray, I think he wanted to speak to it.
No, I think he wants you to do it.
Oh. Okay, so this is a citizen petition, and the petitioner has asked for this to be dismissed. And so I make a motion to dismiss this article.
Is there a second to that motion to dismiss? Okay. This article's not debatable. All in favor of dismissing Article 13, please raise your hands with your cards in them. Put them down, please. All opposed? The motion to dismiss passes. It's unanimous. Article 14 is a citizen's petition sponsored by Westford Climate Action. I have a motion that the town meeting resolve, in response to the escalating climate crisis, that Westford commits to take actions to promote clean energy and reduce fossil fuel use, including promoting energy-efficient upgrades in all town facilities and in private homes and businesses, and purchasing the highest percentage of clean renewable energy in town contracts as feasible, and that the Select Board will charge a task force with studying and making recommendations for specific strategies for Westford to achieve the Commonwealth of Massachusetts limit of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 with intermediate goals. The committee will provide a plan to the Select Board within 9 months of receiving its charge and will report the town's progress towards those goals annually at town meeting. Is there a second for that motion? Okay, presenting the petition are Carol Morse and Beth Perkins.
Hello, I'm Carol Morse, 2 Wagon Trail. I'm the co-chair of Westford Climate Action. Westford Climate Action is a grassroots organization of residents deeply concerned about the impact of climate change. We are grateful to the more than 200 people who signed our petition, so we are able to bring this resolution to town meeting today. We would also like to thank the Select Board for putting sustainability on the list of town goals. Like many of you, we are alarmed by what we are seeing with more frequency every day in the news. Increased storms, droughts, raging wildfires, rising seas, and flooding. Although there are steps each of us can take, we cannot fight global warming alone. We must find actions we can take as a community. We are here today to ask the town for a commitment to take decisive action toward the Commonwealth's goal of net zero greenhouse gases by 2050. Westford is a town that cares about the environment. We have preserved land for future generations, passed a bylaw banning plastic bags and styrofoam, partnered with the Commonwealth as a green community, and increased our renewable content to our town's electricity contract. But the scale and increasing pace of the problem requires us to do more. Cities and towns across the country are taking leadership roles to reduce carbon emissions. Westford needs to join them. Neighboring towns like Acton, Bedford, Concord, and Arlington, along with over 30 communities in Greater Boston, have begun this work. Our resolution simply asks for the appointment of a committee to assess Westford's emissions levels and to develop a plan to begin that work. It does not ask for money. It does, however, ask for town-wide collaboration and leadership to achieve this. In the words of Governor Charlie Baker, meeting this challenge will require bold action and partnership throughout every sector of the economy. We look forward to working with stakeholders to pursue this target in a way that is equitable and cost-effective. Westford Climate Action believes that for the sake of our children and future generations, and for the planet itself, we have a moral responsibility to act without delay. We ask for your support of this article. And now, a few words from my co-chair, Beth Perkins.
Hello, I'm Beth Perkins from Patriot Lane. Why are we coming forward to you as citizens of Westford and attendees of town meeting with this climate action resolution? We come before you because the actions we take here in Westford in our local community have a huge impact. Why is that? As homeowners, businesses, town employees, and members of boards and committees, we make decisions every day that impact our environment. This happens when we buy a car and we choose to consider electric vehicles, when we purchase energy and we decide to increase the percentage of clean, renewable energy, when we recycle and reuse, and when we preserve our forests and our wetlands. As Carol mentioned, cities and towns throughout the United States are leading the climate action movement with plans, solutions, and results to reach the goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions. What does this goal mean? A net zero city or town produces zero net carbon pollution. That's the pollution that causes climate change. In other words, the community gets as much energy from renewable sources as it uses. Getting to net zero comes from a combination of energy efficiency, local clean energy production, and the purchasing of renewable energy. Governor Charlie Baker and our Massachusetts state legislature both support the 2050 goal. And here is some good news. The cost of renewable energy is now competitive with fossil fuels. This year, the International Energy Agency has announced for the first time that electricity produced by solar panels is cheaper than electricity from plants fired by coal or natural gas. New research from Consumer Reports is that the lifetime cost of electric vehicles is less expensive than gasoline-powered alternatives. We need to increase our efforts to create a sustainable community through a partnership of residents, businesses, town boards, and employees who will use innovation, education, and comprehensive and strategic planning to develop a roadmap to 2050. Our resolution is endorsed by Indivisible Westford, Action for Social Justice at First Parish Church, Sustainable Westford, the League of Women Voters of Westford, the Conservation Trust, Conservation Commission, Recycling Commission, Select Board, Westford's Energy Committee, and our State Representative Jim Arciero. Please act now and fight for the health and well-being of our citizens and the lives of future generations by voting yes on Article 14.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? The center mic.
Laura Dickey, Vos Hill Road. I am speaking on behalf of the Westford League of Women Voters in support of this article. The League at the local, state, and national level supports actions to combat climate change, including energy conservation and looking towards renewable resources. Supporting this resolution would be a message to the town that the voters are ready to begin the process of addressing the challenges of climate change locally. The League of Women Voters urges you to vote yes on Article 14. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the resolution as presented, please raise your hands with your cards in the air. Put them down. All opposed? The article passes. It's not unanimous. All right. Article 15 is to amend the town's general and zoning bylaws to reflect inclusive language. Andrea Perna-Sweet, Chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Hello, everyone. At this time, the Select Board is asking that this body dismiss this article for now. And the reasons are as follows. First, you may remember that approximately a year ago, at our special town meeting in October of 2019, this body passed the warrant article that amended our town charter so as to include inclusionary language. That article had to go to the state legislature for the legislature's approval, and there it sits. And it has been sitting there since last October. So that has not yet been approved, although our last communication with our state senator told us that it was coming to the floor of the state Senate within the next couple of weeks and should be approved at that time. So anybody who's interested, please call Senator Kennedy and ask him to get this out onto the floor so we can get it approved. That being said, since it hasn't been approved, it does not seem at this time appropriate for us to now be amending our general bylaw language and our zoning bylaw language to include inclusionary language when we do not have approval from the state for our change in the charter language. And indeed, there is always the possibility that the state may make changes to that. So because of that, we believe it's premature to amend our zoning bylaws and our general bylaws at this time. It is the intent of the Select Board to bring this back as soon as, hopefully, the changes to our state charter are approved so that we can continue to update and amend both the general bylaws as well as the zoning bylaws. So for that reason, we are asking this body at this time to dismiss both the general bylaws and the zoning bylaws. And with respect to the zoning bylaws, there is one other reason that we're asking for dismissal at this point in time. We are about to, as you see in your motions papers, undertake discussion of, I think, 4 or 5 zoning articles. 8, sorry, thank you. 8. Those 8 articles do not include the inclusionary language because they cannot at this time. So if we were to pass Article 15, we would have zoning bylaws that include the inclusionary language, and we'd have zoning bylaws that did not include that language. And then we would have to come back again to fix the 8 bylaws, if they pass, to include the inclusionary language. So the Select Board thought, would just all be easier, less complicated if we do this all at once at hopefully annual town meeting in 2021 when the state legislature hopefully will have passed our charter language. So for all of those reasons, the Select Board is requesting that this article be dismissed by this body at this time. Thank you.
So just to clarify, Article 15 has two motions, one referring to the general bylaws and one referring to the zoning bylaws of the town, and the motion to dismiss applies to both of those motions as they're printed in your book, because it's dismissing the whole article. Is there a second to the motion to dismiss? All in favor, raise your cards in the air. Put them down, please. All opposed? The motion to dismiss passes unanimously. The next 8 articles are requesting changes to our zoning bylaws, and as such, each of them requires a 2/3 majority vote to pass. In each case, the exact wording of the changes proposed was available in a handout on the way in, or it can also be found online at the town's website, westfordma.gov. Article 16, I have a motion to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Westford to clarify the definition of minimum lot frontage. Is there a second to that motion? Jeff Morissette, Director of Land Use Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Morissette. I'm your Director of Land Use Management. I've been asked to be as brief as possible as I can here today. First, I'd like to talk to you about our intent to clarify minimum lot frontage requirements. So for those of you who may not know, what is lot frontage? In simplest terms, lot frontage is the length of a lot along the street. And our zoning bylaw for each zoning district specifies the minimum lot frontage that is necessary to create a new lot. What we are asking town meeting to consider today is to clarify what we believe the intent has always been, that the minimum lot frontage requirement must be satisfied by frontage that is continuous. And so we propose adding just one word, continuous, to Appendix C, our table of dimensional and density regulations, so that it now reads, minimum continuous lot frontage. The Planning Board concluded their public hearing on this matter on October 5th, and they unanimously voted 5-0-0 to recommend this article. Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Again, this takes a 2/3 majority. All in favor of the amendment as indicated, please raise your cards in the air. Put them down, please. All opposed? The motion passes by 2/3 majority. It is not unanimous.
Thank you.
That brings us to Article 17. I have a motion to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Westford to extend the time for lapse of special permits. Is there a second? Jeff?
Thank you. So what is a special permit? A special permit is a discretionary permit issued by a special permit granting authority as outlined in your zoning bylaw. In most cases, these permits are granted by either the Planning Board or the Zoning Board of Appeals. They're not obligated to grant these permits. That's why they're called discretionary. They may impose reasonable conditions, and it takes 4 out of 5 members to approve such permits. Once a special permit is granted, the applicant currently has 2 years, up to 2 years, to make use of the approval, or it expires. It lapses. In 2016, the general laws were amended to allow for a lapse of special permits of up to 3 years. We're asking you to amend our zoning bylaws to be consistent with the general laws and to give our boards that same discretion and opportunity to offer lapses of special permits of up to 3 years instead of 2. And from my time here in Westford, what I can tell you is that it's my opinion that it would have been the homeowners who would have been most likely to benefit from such an amendment. Most of the developers typically have either land use attorneys or other professionals carefully safeguarding and protecting their interests. But for the homeowners, sometimes life gets in the way and 2 years can be gone in the blink of an eye. So the Planning Board concluded their public hearing on this matter on October 5th, and they unanimously voted 5-0-0 to recommend this article. Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none. Again, this requires a 2/3 majority. All in favor, please raise your cards in the air. Down, please. All opposed? The article passes unanimously. Hold on to your cards. That brings us to Article 18. I have a motion to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Westford to clarify the definition of gross floor area. Is there a second? Rebecca Cheney, Town Planner.
Good afternoon, everyone. The purpose of this amendment is to clarify area standards which are found in our section on accessory dwelling units. For those of you who may not know, an accessory dwelling unit is a smaller unit. It's often located in a basement or above a garage. Sometimes they're called in-law apartments or ADUs. And we would like to replace two undefined terms which are found in that section with a defined term. And the adoption of this amendment would not change how the section is interpreted or administered. And on October 5th, the Planning Board voted to unanimously recommend the article.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Again, it's a 2/3 majority required to pass. All in favor, please raise your cards in the air. And put them down. All opposed? The article passes unanimously. That brings us to Article 19. Rebecca?
Yes, thank you. This is the article to regulate massage establishments. And again, on October 5th, the Planning Board closed this hearing and recommended that this article be referred back to committee and brought to a future town meeting.
Can I have a motion to dismiss Article 19? Is there a second? All in favor of dismissing Article 19, please raise your cards in the air. You can put them down. All opposed? The dismissal passes unanimously. That brings us to Article 20. I have a motion to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Westford by deleting the growth management bylaw. Is there a second? Jeff Morissette.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So this section of our zoning bylaw expired in 2009. It takes up approximately 5 pages of our zoning bylaw, and we cannot enforce it. And from a practical standpoint, it only serves to hinder our ability to secure various grants. So whether you are for limiting restriction or limiting development in town or against, we hope that you can support deleting this section of our zoning bylaw. The Planning Board concluded their public hearing on this matter on October 5th and unanimously voted 5-0-0 to recommend this article. Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any questions or comments? All in favor of Article 20, motion made, please raise your hands and your cards. Put them down, please. All opposed? The motion passes by 2/3. It is not unanimous. This brings us to Article 21. I have a motion to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Westford to regulate short-term rentals. Is there a second? Jeff Morissette.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So this article proposes to define and regulate short-term rentals and establish an overlay district. So for a little background, in late of 2019, the Board of Selectmen received numerous complaints about some short-term rentals in town, Airbnbs, and they requested that the planning board sponsor a zoning bylaw amendment to try and address some of these concerns. So in response, the planning board offers this amendment for consideration by town meeting, which proposes three things. First, it wants to define short-term rentals. The second is to regulate short-term rentals. In other words, where and under what circumstances might this be allowable, and where and under what circumstances would it be prohibited. And lastly, it proposes to create an overlay district where short-term rentals would be allowed by right within the Summer Village Cottage community.
This also requires a 2/3 majority. Are there any questions?
If I
sorry.
could just, sorry for that. So in simplest terms, how are we looking to define it? It's the rental of any dwelling unit or portion thereof for not more than 27 consecutive days. So if it's 27 or fewer days, it could be considered short-term rental. If it's 28 days or longer, it would not be considered short-term rental. How do we propose to regulate it? We're suggesting that in the residential zoning districts, that's Residence A, Residence B, we would prohibit it as a principal use. For all the other non-residential zoning districts, we would look to authorize it by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it would be allowed in the non-residential with a special permit. We would also look to authorize it as an accessory use in all of the zoning districts with benefit of a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I don't know if that clarifies that. And then if a question comes up, what do you mean when you say principal use versus accessory use? So principal use, it's the main or primary purpose for which that structure or that lot is designed or intended to be used or occupied. And the accessory use, it has to be incidental or subordinate to the primary use. And so what does that mean in terms of short-term rentals in the residential zoning districts? That means that a short-term rental cannot exist on its own unless it's standing under the umbrella of a single-family dwelling use on that lot. So, and then the last part of this bylaw proposes an overlay district for the Summer Village Cottage community. And why are we looking to do this? So from a practical standpoint, short-term rentals have really been part of that community since it first began, perhaps 10 or more years ago. It's always been part of their culture. They have a rental committee. They self-regulate. And they're only allowed to be there perhaps 6 months of the year. And so if we didn't adopt this overlay district, we would run into some challenges if we were trying to regulate it the same way that we propose for the special permits, because there wouldn't be a principal single-family residential use occurring that it could be accessory to. So we think this is a simple approach that tries to address many of the concerns. If there's any short-term rentals going on in a residential neighborhood, it would have to be a public hearing process with a butter notification. And then simply as an accessory use in all districts, it would still require a public hearing process. So it would be above board. We would be in a much better place today if we adopted some form of a bylaw like this, because right now our bylaw is completely silent with respect to short-term rentals. And so we've already had these conversations with folks. Where does it say in our bylaw that we can't do this? And we have to tell them, well, section 3.1.1 says any use not expressly permitted is prohibited. That's not a good way to start a conversation. It's much better to say what it is so we can start out of the gate. Is it or isn't it? And then is it allowed, is it not allowed? And so we hope that you'll give this proper consideration. We're happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Jeff, could I ask you to give the planning board report before I go to the questions?
Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. So the planning board concluded their public hearing on this matter on October 5th and unanimously voted 5-0-0 to recommend this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Question at the microphone to my left.
Yes, Alan Moyer, 69 Forest Road. My question is, do we have any landowners, property owners, who have invested in structures in Westford that would be denied their use by this measure? Are we taking property rights from anyone who will miss them?
Jeff, would you answer that question?
So I'll take a stab at that one, and council can step in and correct me if I'm mistaken. So we have had some property owners who have tried to operate short-term rentals in Westford. And so for starters, our building department did reach out to them and advise them that we were taking the position that short-term rentals were not permitted. And so they adjusted their rental period so as not to be construed as a short-term rental. So they upped their minimal rental period so that it wouldn't be considered short-term rental in this interim period. And secondly, the unfortunate reality is, again, if a use is not permitted, it is prohibited. But unfortunately, to the average person, that's not easy to take away from our zoning bylaw. The best thing that we can do is to simply clarify it by saying, this is what short-term rentals are.
Thank you.
At the microphone to my right.
Denali Delmar, 8 Dunstable Road. Anyone who knows me knows that the last thing in the world that you would say about me is that I'm a libertarian. However, I just feel so strongly that short-term rentals, Airbnb, should not be prohibited. I think they should be allowed. Live and let live in this economy that we're living in right now. It helps people like every one of us to be able to rent a room for a short time. And we're pretty careful. I mean, I've never done it, but I'm sure that we would all be very careful because it's our homes. So I think it's a great move to not have a house be exclusively short-term rentals. But if you have to notify your neighbors, everyone knows what NIMBY means, not in my backyard. When we tried to have parking for the bicycle trail, the Bruce Freeman Trail, neighbors just were frightened. I'm sorry, but don't be frightened. You know, we're all human beings, and I think we should be allowed to rent a room if we want to for a week or two for someone who's coming to a wedding, someone who's coming to a graduation. So I actually, what I would like to do is I'd like to have this dismissed and go back and look at making short-term rentals be allowed and have the selectmen or whatever board is responsible respond to problems that arise. Thank you.
At the center microphone.
Chris Sanders, Koala Bear Lane. Just agreement with Denali that I think a case got made for the overlay, but I didn't hear a case made for disallowing short-term rentals, and it feels like taking freedoms away without making that case is a tough one. I understand that the bylaws don't allow it, so I understand that clarification, but I think there should probably be a case made in favor or against it first before just bringing a case against.
At my left, Mark, are you at the microphone?
Yep, please. Mark Koss, 7 Grassy Lane. So I find it a little bit ironic that we just had a discussion about energy and not allowing people the freedom to choose what sort of energy they would like to have. And yet within my neighborhood, if my neighborhood of however many homes happens to be, somebody chooses to have nightly visitors and charge whatever they charge per night and have whatever issues go on, that we're okay with that. So without any specific regulations and having listened to the complaints of many people at one of our board meetings about the issues they were experiencing, not having a regulation for a town that likes regulations is a little bit ironic to me. So I would vote in favor of this motion.
Are there any other questions? Oh. At the center microphone.
Thank you,
Mrs.
Ellen
Hardy.
Hardy, 39 Main Street. I don't have the page that I was looking for, Jeff, in my table of use regulations, but I thought that you could provide room and board for up to 4 people in your home, which means you're there and someone's in your guest room because they're there for a granddaughter's graduation. Is that still permitted? And is that different than what you're asking us to permit now, which would mean the homeowner perhaps is nowhere to be seen, and another family is in fact living there? Is this a distinction? Because it's important for me to know that. Thank you.
Jeff?
Madam Moderator. So this is fairly complicated arrangement here. We have bed and breakfast utilities, we have borders mentioned in our zoning bylaw. And so typically when I think of boarding, I think at least from back in the day, it used to mean a fairly lengthy period of time. The zoning bylaw does, as you mentioned, allow for boarding, renting 1 or more of your bedrooms up to a certain maximum number of persons at any one time. That's still allowable. But this could impact that by saying if it's going to be for shorter periods of time, you might first need to secure a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. If it's in you would need a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, actually, regardless of which zoning district it's in. And if it's longer than the 27 days, it just falls under the boarding, and it wouldn't be considered a short-term rental at that point.
At the microphone to my left.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dylan O'Connor, 3 Lambert Way, and Vice Chair of the Planning Board. I just wanted to bring up for everybody here who might be thinking, how would this be applied in my neighborhood or your neighborhood? Keep in mind what Jeff spoke about with regard to principal use, right? So if you're trying to understand what this change would mean to you, there couldn't be a home in your neighborhood where the owner is never actually there and is simply renting it on a regular basis for short periods of time, right? So that is really the intent of what we're trying to regulate here with this article. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
At the microphone to my right.
Will this be a source of income for the town?
Jeff?
No, not to my knowledge. Council may chime in if there are any taxes for the short-term rentals, but in terms of the town assessing a fee for this, the only fees that would be incurred would be, as a matter of course, if there's any applications before a board. So it would be to offset those costs, and there could be some minor fees associated with rentals that I'm hoping council can chime in here. It's not through the town.
John Giorgio, Town Council.
Madam Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, the last January, actually it was the end of December, Massachusetts passed an amendment to the local options rooms tax, which currently exists in Westford, and the town charges a tax of 6%. So if you go to the Westford Regency, there's a 6% local options tax put on the bill, and that revenue comes to the town. What the legislature did last December was to extend the hotel rooms tax to include short-term rentals. So if someone is engaging in the short-term rental of property in Westford, they have to pay the Commonwealth the hotel tax, including the 6% local tax, and that 6% will be remitted back to, or is remitted back to the town.
At the microphone in the rear.
Hi, yes, Chris Redmond from Hartford Road. I think this is not fully thought through. I think there needs to be more allowances for single rooms to be let out on short-term basis, less than 27 days. And potentially as well, you need to allow for people who are going away for a 2-week break to allow their properties to be done. But I would agree that we don't want people going, or I would be against houses being used on a permanent basis for Airbnb and things. That's my view.
And at the microphone to my right.
Mark Keys, Steeple Chase Circle. I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding something here. I think I heard two diametric positions on this. If I am a homeowner and I am just renting out a room, but I live in the house, would I still need to go through town to get permission to do that, or only if the entire dwelling is renting out on a short-term basis?
Jeff?
So short-term rentals would include portion of a dwelling. So a room would be a portion.
Understood, but if I want to rent out a room in my house while I'm living there, I have to go through the approval process, correct?
That is correct. It would be possible to secure a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, but some of the concerns I've heard is that what you're just alluding to is that if the entire house were being rented out as short-term rentals on a continual basis, that's not something that one could get a special permit for. That would be prohibited in the residential zoning districts.
Understood. Thank you.
Denali?
I'm very sympathetic with none of us want any particular house in our neighborhood to be rented all the time to short-term rentals. However, I think that the matter before us needs to be split, because I cannot vote to require my neighbor who's out of a job and wants to rent their spare room because their kid's off at college or something. I can't vote for them to have to go and get a permit for that and pay for all the neighbors to be notified, and then have a hearing where people are going to say, oh goodness, I'm frightened, let's not do this. This is taking people's freedom away. So I have to vote against it because you haven't split it in two. Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, I'll call for the vote. Again, as a change to the zoning bylaws, this requires a 2/3 majority. All those in favor of amending the zoning bylaw to regulate short-term rentals, please raise your cards in the air. Put them down. All those opposed, please raise your cards in the air. No. I think we'll have to call for a count on that, sorry. Tellers, you need your exercise. Ready? All those in favor, please, oh, sorry, one moment. Okay. Okay. We have people here this afternoon that were not here this morning, so I just want to let everybody know what the rules are for counting. You must have your own orange voter card, and in order to vote, you have to hold that card up when I call for your vote as either an aye or an nay. Please keep your card up until I tell you to put it down, so that the tellers have time to count. So all those in favor of amending the zoning bylaw to regulate short-term rentals, please put your cards in the air. And please don't enter or leave the field while we're counting the vote. While we're waiting for the count, I want to show everybody the gavel that was passed on to me. Isn't that cool? This is at least 50 years old. And please don't leave today until you hear me bang it, because I have to bang it at least once. At the adjournment, yes. Photo op. Hands down. All those opposed to amending the zoning bylaw, please put your cards in the air, in your hands. Please keep your hands up until the vote is tallied. Okay, you can put your hands down. So while the tellers are tallying that vote, Article 22 is dependent on Article 21's outcome. So we will need to skip to Article 23. For Article 23, I have a motion to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Westford to allow restaurant drive-through facilities. Is there a second to that motion? Bob Schaffer from the Planning Board.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Schaffer, 7 Blakes Hill Road, member of the Planning Board. What I want to start with first here is to make a motion to amend the motion you see before you in the following way. I make a motion to approve Article 23 with the following amendment to restrict restaurant drive-through facilities to the commercial highway zoning district only. And let me just be clear on what this means from the handout that you've...
Let's get a second on the amendment. Is there a second? Thank you. Okay.
To explain the differences are in 2 locations. The first location, if you were picked up the handout up front, is in Appendix A, Table of Principal Use Regulations on the second page. Under item D sub C, other commercial uses, item 5, restaurant drive-through. This would only allow by special permit under SPB, under the column of commercial highway. And secondly, similarly, in Appendix B, Table of Accessory Use Regulations on the first page, item B, non-residential uses for drive-through facility restaurants to only allow by special permit by the planning board under the commercial highway column. So that's, I'm making that as a motion, Madam Moderator.
Are there any questions about the motion to amend? Up at the, no? Okay. Then we'll vote on the motion to, somebody's going to the microphone back there. Yes, in the back.
Vicky Geary, 51 Carlisle Road. Could you clarify, like, define for me where the commercial, where in Westford would this impact? Because I'm just really having a hard time with it.
Okay, I'm sorry, Bob.
No.
Did you answer the question? Or you can go ahead and answer the question.
I'm waiting for that. Okay, Madam Moderator and members of town meeting.
Thank you for being so polite.
Predominantly, the commercial highway district is a strip of lots, parcels along Route 110, no more than 250 feet deep off of Route 110. There are two other parcels as well. There's a cluster of parcels in the Neshoba Valley ski area, predominantly in the area of the new tubing area. These parcels that are commercial highway do not include the parcels that contain the lodge or the restaurant or Sunset Tiki. And the other area is a small portion of two parcels right up on the town border with Tingsboro along Makepeace Road and Route 3. And it is the parcel that is predominantly the New Quality Fence Company Corporation.
Thank you.
Is there a question at the right-hand microphone? No? Okay. All right, we're voting on the amendment. All in favor of amending Article 23 to limit restaurant drive-through facilities to the commercial highway zone, please raise your cards in the air. All right, put them down. All opposed? Motion to amend passes. Now we're at the main motion. Bob?
Let me begin just by saying that the original motion was endorsed 5-0-0 by the planning board this past Monday evening. Today we have 4 members in attendance, and the motion to endorse was 4-0-0 for the amended motion. So back in the late winter, early spring, as you know, with the COVID shutdowns that went across the state and the town, the health department, our planning and permitting departments began working vigorously with restaurants to establish curbside pickup areas, curbside pickup procedures and regulations on an ad hoc basis. At the same time, the planning board then initiated discussions of potential changes to the Westford zoning bylaws in response to COVID. Over the course of many months, the result of this discussion between the planning board, town staff, and representatives of residents that attended the meetings resulted in the article you see here today. The planning board and town hall staff have received a number of questions both via email as well as verbally as to why drive-through restaurants now could not be permitted, why they have to be prohibited. Let me say that as a person with an engineering and science background, I like to have evidence when making a decision, as do many of you, I think. Based upon the increased use of curbside pickup areas and no observed increase in littering or loitering at these locations, I think we now have evidence that demonstrate that an increase in littering and loitering will not occur as a result of food pickup, either through a drive-through window or through curbside pickup. Predominantly, we are presenting this article to you today because of a matter of health and convenience. We basically have had two types of individuals or groups that have asked us to reconsider drive-through restaurants for Westford. One group are parents, grandparents, caregivers who have no underlying health conditions, but do, out of an abundance of concern, not want to take a large group of children or others under their care into a restaurant at this time. And they've asked us for the convenience of having drive-through restaurants with drive-through ordering as well as the drive-through pickup. The second group is similar, but they now have an underlying health concern and increased risk due to COVID. So they've asked us to consider for them this high risk of infection and to allow for drive-through restaurants where they would get the convenience of ordering while maintaining a healthy, safe distance of exposure from the restaurant employees. And lastly, what we're doing here is really assisting businesses so that there is a more convenient mechanism to continue doing business, but to do so in a safe manner. And as we enter a period of the year where we're going to see more inclement weather, to facilitate those operations so that the staff, as well as the purchasers of the meals, are less exposed to inclement weather. So with that, Madam Moderator, I will conclude and just be willing to take questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Denali Delmar, Dunstable Road. I was on the planning board when we disallowed drive-throughs except for pharmacies. I think what you see on 110 is partly a result. We don't have a Taco Bell. We don't have a Wendy's, all of these other places. I think that curbside pickup is enough. COVID is not going to last forever. There are plenty of neighboring towns, and certainly Nashua, that have all of the drive-throughs that you possibly could desire. It's up to you, this body, to make the decision if you think that we should just allow drive-throughs. The opponents that I've talked to say that's too often the line of cars gets backed up into the road. That's a problem. Someone else said to me, there is no God-given right to a drive-through. But it's up to this body to make a decision about it. And it doesn't hurt us, most of us, doesn't hurt us to get up and walk into a restaurant. With curbside pickup, they will just bring it out to you during this crisis time. So we'll have a vote soon. Thank you.
And at the microphone to my left.
Arnold Price, 19 Oak Hill Road. Full disclosure, I work for the health department and I inspect all the restaurants. In response to what was just said, we did have a Wendy's and we did have a Burger King, and part of the reason they went out of business was probably because they didn't have a drive-through. This is a business-friendly thing. Probably in this town, I would estimate there's 4 or 5 places max that can accommodate a drive-through just due to the building layout. I'd also like to say that a drive-through is a much safer thing to have for a restaurant than curbside, because they drive in straight, they drive out. It's continuous, just for a quick stop. Curbside pickup, they're driving into spots, they're backing up, swerving around, and then driving out. So I do happen to know that the McDonald's here in town, a fast food restaurant without a drive-through, was not open during COVID just due to the fact that they didn't have a drive-through. As a matter of fact, they're still not seating people inside. So this is a business-friendly thing. This brings us into the 21st century, in my opinion, with what's out there in a whole lot of other communities. and I strongly recommend approval.
And at the center microphone.
Yes, thank you, moderators. Chauncey Chu, Green Needles Road. I have a couple of points I'd like to make in opposition to this amendment. First of all, the planning board is stressing the convenience factor. I don't see any difference between a drive-through and curbside pickup. Actually, I think you save a little more time with curbside pickup. You call in, place the order, drive to the restaurant. By the time you get there, they have their order already prepared, ready for delivery to your car. Drive-in restaurant, you're going to have to go through a stacking queue, place your order, and then wait again in another stacking queue, and then pick up your order and drive off. Curbside pickup, they open your door, drop it off, and you're gone. It probably takes you a few minutes as opposed to going through a drive-through. As far as the littering, I'm not talking about littering at the restaurant. I'm talking about littering on the roadside. How many folks have driven through the roads in town and seen Dunkin' Donut cups by the roadside? I think a drive-in is going to increase, besides the traffic, increase the litter. As far as the safety aspect, I have asked the police department if they had any statistics. There are no statistics pro or con a drive-through or curbside pickup. As far as the recent amendment we approved, I think that's a result of a recent select board's decision not to endorse this article because there was no mention of constraining the number of restaurants. They have defined the locations, but they have not defined the number of possible restaurants. We take a look at our abutting towns, Acton, Carlisle, Groton, Littleton, they all prohibit drive-through restaurants. If we say, hey, I'm missing two of our abutting neighbors, Tingsboro only allowed 3 drive-through restaurants by special permit, and Chelmsford has a special overlay district. So anyways, I think the planning board, they say they can control drive-through restaurants, the permitting drive-through restaurants by their zoning, but just by evidence of their non-answer to the selectman's point of how many drive-through restaurants would be permitted, I'm not sure they have considered all aspects. One aspect that I have in mind is the sign bylaw. Under section, I believe it's 5.3.5.7, a restaurant is limited to a menu sign outside of their establishment to 2 square feet. 2 square feet, or the regular sign bylaw, which says 1 square foot per linear foot of building. So we know now immediately they're going to ask for a variance on the signs. You know, the menu sign is another pole sign or a monument sign, but it's going to be an additional sign to their building sign. So I ask you to take these considerations. I think the planning board's amendment needed to include the criteria in which they would allow or give out the special permit. So I ask you to consider these and vote down this amendment. I don't think the town wants to have the Golden Arches as the gateway to Westford. Thank you.
I don't think he asked a question, Bob. I'm going to go to the other microphone. He didn't ask any questions. Microphone on my right.
Hi, Misty Bergeron, 18 Drawbridge Road. I was at the last town meeting when we tried to discuss drive-throughs, and I just wanted to present a couple perspectives about considering drive-throughs as giving people an option. People who could use this option include someone like myself, who was an exhausted working mom with a toddler and an infant in her car, knowing if she shut the car off, those kids would wake up and all I wanted was a coffee. So I would drive to Chelmsford and give those franchisees my business. Many of these franchises are also owned by people. Yes, they are corporations, but keep in mind families own a lot of these. The second consideration are people who are elderly, such as my dad, who has COVID. I'm sorry, not COVID, COPD, the other four, COPD, who's had to, for health reasons, give up a lot, who's unable to walk far distances and lives for his decaf coffee. Being able to drive through and get that is hugely important for him, and he also takes his business to other towns where he's able to use the drive-through. And last are our public safety workers who are on duty, particularly inclement weather, long shifts. It really is about making it convenient for people to get what they need. Regarding the traffic, having worked in town at several local businesses and hearing people say that they also stop in their commutes in other towns to pick up their morning coffee or whatever, and having lived here prior to Cornerstone being built, the traffic is here. It's unorganized. I was hit in the Cornerstone parking lot last fall by someone backing out of a space, and my son and I were nearly run over by a giant truck just last week who cut through the Cornerstone parking lot. So the questions I have are, prior to today's meeting, I did do some research and try to understand the impact that drive-thrus have on traffic and litter. There's also been some addressing of increase in obesity in other communities. And by and large, they have, from what I've read, have found that those do not necessarily increase. So I'd like a little bit more information on the research that has been done regarding those increases, or potentially risky increases in things like litter, traffic.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat what you're looking for more information on?
Yes, so the comment was made.
Wait one moment while this plane passes.
Oh.
All right, thank you.
So the comment was made that based on the research that's been done, looking at these local businesses, that we haven't seen an increase in traffic. So I just wanted to understand, are there studies that have been done or studies that can be referenced from other towns that have allowed them that would either prove or disprove the potential increases in any of these items?
Okay. Bob, do you have the answer to that question?
No, because I'm not sure I was the one who made that assertion.
No, you weren't.
So
that was another voter who made that comment.
Yeah.
The microphone to my left.
Kathy Lynch, Rush Road. I think that we should leave this up to the businesses to decide. I don't think they'll make these decisions willy-nilly. There's plenty of businesses that are having struggles keeping enough customers coming in. They're losing their livelihoods because they're not pulling in enough business. I think that they should have that opportunity to decide if it makes sense for them or not. And it's not up to us to decide how they do their business. It's really up to them to decide if it makes sense. I'd really like to support the business, and I recommend that people give businesses that option.
And at the center microphone.
Megan Ackroth, Timberley Lane. I'd like to understand if this passes, if it would apply to existing and new businesses in town, and also if those individual businesses would have to come before the planning board or the select board to then formally apply to have a drive-through, and if that application would be tied to considering their location and their traffic patterns, or if it would be sort of a carte blanche. And then furthermore, if they were granted a drive-through, I think we're mostly talking probably about McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, would they be allowed to put a sign with their business and drive-through promoted on 495 at exit 32, thereby increasing highway traffic to get off to those businesses?
Bob?
So I should have emphasized during my initial presentation that this is a special permit by the planning board, and to reemphasize what was said several articles ago, a special permit is a discretionary permit. We are not obliged to grant it. And we will be I think I can pledge that the planning board will be very aggressive in reviewing all of the conditions and setting conditions that are friendly to Westford. That would include looking at the traffic flow, looking at the signage, looking at screenage, looking at mechanisms to have safe transit of traffic through the property, as well as screening the queues, and to do it in a Westford-friendly manner. Thank you.
And Bob, I think the last question was about signage on 495 saying there were drive-through restaurants.
Well, I think that's something we also could consider in that application and have a discussion with the applicant, hopefully about limiting that so that we don't encourage a lot of traffic coming off the highway, but we do help provide the benefit to the Westford residents that today we're trying to benefit.
And the microphone to my right.
Paul Fossbender, 14 Texas Road. We didn't get here by accident. There are no drive-through restaurants in Westford because it's been part of our DNA for as long as I can remember. I've been here for 40 years. When the original 110 master plan was going in, there was a lot of discussion about what types of businesses we wanted along 110 and what types we wanted to exclude. As I recall, the discussion in those days was we didn't want a lot of chains and franchises. We wanted a lot of nice sit-down mom and pop restaurants and so forth. Now, admittedly, times change. However, the process that we went through with that was a lot of public hearings, a lot of discussion. It got put into several master plans, and our current master plan states, and I quote, "In the CH district, other uses, including drive-through facilities, are allowed by special permit, but while restaurants are permitted use, drive-in restaurants are specifically prohibited. This suggests that although the CH district lies along Route 110, the town does not want it to become a free-for-all strip commercial zone replete with drive-through establishments." So we've had this for quite a while. After the master plan went in, I was involved with the sign bylaw working group and sign bylaw review committee. I can assure you there were more discussions about signs for drive-through restaurants, and it was specifically decided not to put friendly terms in the sign bylaw for those people. So as Chauncey mentioned, they would definitely have to come for some sort of sign bylaw relief to do this. I think if we want to move forward with this, rather than make a decision today, we should go through the same type of process that we went through in developing the current bylaws and the master plan, which is either to update the master plan, have some sort of a working group that gets a lot more input than we've had today and answers a lot of the unanswered questions that have come up, and bring this back at a future town meeting.
To my right.
Emily Gilstrap, 17 Oak Road. A comment and a question. Just speaking personally as a mother of 2 small children, I agree that with the comment about options, you know, I haven't been able to enter an establishment for months, and it sure would be nice to be able to drive through somewhere. And I don't think that, you know, COVID's not going away quickly, and it, you know, that kind of thing may come back. So you know, a lot of things are not going to return to the way they were. And I think that we should move forward by increasing our options and our abilities to reduce social contact when necessary. And I just agreed with the comment about moving into the 21st century. And I just wanted to ask, since the motion was amended, I don't know if we have this information, but I saw that the Board of Selectmen does not recommend the initial article. Would this amendment change that?
Board of Selectmen, okay. They'll come back to us with the answer to your question. Center microphone.
Vicki Geary, 51 Carlisle Road. I am not in favor of this change to the bylaws. I know there was a comment made about this being a business-friendly option. We have a lot of businesses in that corridor that, for the structure of where they are, how they are, they don't even have the option. Even if we said, yeah, you can have a drive-through, they don't have that option. Instead, this is going to allow new businesses or businesses that have that separate structure like McDonald's to be able to have the option of a drive-through. The businesses that are in those existing positions where they don't have that option, they've now got the curbside drive-through. Even Dunkin' Donuts has curbside pickup. And by allowing some places to have a drive-through, where other places just physically can't, puts those places at a competitive disadvantage. And these are businesses that have given a lot back to the community of Westford. Many of them have hosted fundraisers for various locations, and I just don't see this as a business-friendly thing for them when we turn around and, for lack of a better word, change the rules midstream or mid-game. So I am opposed to this change in the bylaws.
At the microphone to my right.
Erica Cole, 4 Francis Hill Road. I'd like to just make a comment regarding the potential environmental impact, which is neither extreme nor minuscule. It was raised earlier, pointed out earlier, that many of our abutting towns also have either prohibited or minimized the amount of businesses which are allowed to have drive-throughs. If we were essentially a magnet for the ones that, the new businesses that wanted to have drive-throughs, it could potentially impact some of the character, but more importantly to me from an environmental perspective is that these businesses, if they were to try to build in some of these zones, would have to provide impervious space for both parking and for drive-through. Or if McDonald's wanted to back out into some of the woods behind in order to provide the same amount of parking that they have currently, but they would also have to then have impervious space available for the drive-through itself. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is that, you know, if we've all been to Drum Hill, we've seen how some of those lines at Dunkin' Donuts can extend quite a while and sit there for quite a while, and you have a lot of idling cars going on. And, you know, it's interesting that we just identified a desire to go carbon neutral, but having extended lines of idling cars certainly doesn't further us in that direction. And for these reasons, that, you know, I'm not saying that is the only reason to go against this motion, but for me, it's a contributing factor. Thank you.
And on the microphone to my left.
Marian Fleckner, 23R Elmeria Circle. I request to move the question.
Okay. The motion to move the question takes precedence. Is there a second to that motion? Okay. All in favor of terminating debate and taking a vote on the question, wait a minute. And taking a vote on the question, please raise your cards in the air. Now. All right, put them down. All opposed to terminating the debate, if you want to have continuing discussion, please raise your cards in the air. The motion to move the question passes by a 2/3 majority. It has to pass by the same majority as the motion itself needs. All right, so we are terminating debate and moving to the vote on the main motion as amended, which is to amend the zoning bylaw to allow restaurant drive-throughs in the business district. If you are in favor of that, and this vote requires a 2/3 majority. Sorry. Do you have a point of order? I think we've terminated. Okay, thank you. Rebecca Cheney has corrected me. It's the commercial highway district, not the business district. One moment. All right. So we have voted to terminate discussion. A no vote on the. Point
of order?
Yes. What's your point of order?
The request for the selectman's opinion was asked for prior to ending debate.
This is what we're.
It would be helpful to have that information before voting.
One moment, please.
Didn't we ask for it?
I'm sorry, debate has been terminated. So, we are now voting on the main motion. All those in favor of amending the zoning bylaw, as indicated, please raise your cards in the air. Okay, put your cards down. All those opposed? The motion fails. It's not a 2/3 majority. Okay, back to Article 22 on the regulation of short-term rentals. That motion failed. It did not achieve a 2/3 majority. The vote was 124 in favor, 83 against. Article 22. This article is to amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Westford to regulate short-term rentals, particularly as pertaining to Summer Village. Is there a second? Jeff Morissette.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So this article was somewhat similar to the previous article regarding short-term rentals. That article that was defeated proposed 3 things. This article proposes just 2 of those 3 things: to define short-term rentals and to create an overlay district for the Summer Village Cottage community. So even if folks aren't happy with the definition of short-term rental, I think it would still be a great thing to do to consider at least creating the overlay district for the Summer Village Rental Condo Association. So just for a point of information, when we did investigate and go online and look at the number of short-term rentals that were being advertised at the various websites, Summer Village had more than half of them. So if we were to have to take enforcement action or investigate, it would be really nice from a very selfish perspective if we could at least resolve that one part of this problem. So thank you for your consideration.
Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote. Yes, you can use this microphone right here. You don't have to. Thank you. Just give us your name and tell us where you live.
Sure.
Are you a registered voter in Westford?
I am not. So I'm a cottage owner in Summer Village.
Okay.
And I'm on the rental committee there, and I'm not voting, but I just wanted to.
Okay.
Say a few words.
Is everybody hearing this? There's a gentleman here who is not a registered voter. He's on the committee, is it the association? At Summer Village, who would like to address the meeting. He needs your permission in order to do so. Is there a motion to allow this gentleman to address the meeting? Is there a second? I'm sorry, could you give me your name again, sir?
Alan Kramer.
All in favor of letting Mr. Kramer address the meeting, please raise your cards. Put them down. All opposed? The motion passes. You can address the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. My name's Alan Kramer, and I'm on the rental committee at Summer Village. As many of you know, Summer Village is a self-contained seasonal community of 276 cottages that abut long sought-for pond. Well, most of our cottage owners, our cottages are owner-occupied and don't rent. A few do rent to locals and other people, primarily for their summer vacations. Article 22 creates an overlay district for Summer Village and exempts us from short-term rental restrictions. Both the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, I believe, unanimously support Article 22, and I hope that everyone else here will as well. There's many reasons why I believe that Article 22 benefits everybody in Westford. Here's just a few of those reasons. A substantial number of people who rent at Summer Village are Westford residents. Obviously, the location is very convenient, but it's also a much less expensive alternative to going to the Cape and various other places. Short-term rentals are not only welcomed at Summer Village, but they've always been a part of our community, and we hope that you will support it so that it can continue. Unlike having rowdy kids that may rent in an Airbnb situation or host a party and disturb neighbors, we are somewhat of an isolated community that has very strict rental rules to make sure that there's no abuse. Our rental rules have capacity limits. We can't have more than 6 people stay at a cottage, for example. We have quiet hours and penalties if there's any violations. I know firsthand these rules are strictly enforced and benefit the people in Summer Village as well as the town at large. Finally, and I think the reason why the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board unanimously support this article is it will save the town money and manpower, as Jeff had mentioned. Since Summer Village strictly regulates our rentals, they will not have to use town resources to enforce those regulations, and I think that'll be a great savings to the town. So I hope everybody here will join the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board and myself in support of Article 22. Thank you for letting me speak.
Jeff, did you give the Planning Board report on this? Or if you did, could you give it again?
No, Madam Moderator. Thank you again for that reminder. The Planning Board concluded their hearing on this item on October 5th and voted unanimously 5-0-0 to recommend this article.
Have a comment to the left?
Madam Moderator, Alan Moyer, 69 Forest Road. I'm in favor of the article, but I have a question. We just previously voted in the previous article not to have this definition take effect in the rest of the town. While I do agree with the Summer Village having this overlay district, having the definition of short-term rentals seems like it will run counter to what we just voted on. Would this affect, the question on this amendment, would this affect the rest of the town?
Jeff?
Thank you. I'll take a stab at this. So, as I mentioned earlier, our bylaw states that what is not expressly permitted is prohibited. And so even if this passes as written, it would only authorize or permit short-term rentals in the Summer Village overlay district. It would, however, as you mentioned, provide a definition for short-term rentals, which even though we have nothing published in our bylaw yet, that is the position our building commissioner has taken in terms of what is or is not a short-term rental in the here and now. It's consistent with what I believe the state has adopted. So for lack of a definition, we're going by the default, the status quo, what the state has adopted. And so it would not affect the rest of the town. It wouldn't give them the ability to provide short-term rentals. It'd be the status quo, except we'd have a definition.
And again at the left-hand microphone.
Good afternoon, Juliet Mount, Boston Road. Question. The details that were just provided related to the current occupancy and late hour restrictions and all for the community are make a compelling argument. Can we include in this change that this is acceptable as long as those rules remain intact?
So I think that's outside the scope of the motion. I don't think you could make an amendment to that effect. That doesn't mean the planning board couldn't examine that and come back at the future, but I don't think that amendment to this proposal could be made by town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no further discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of Article 22, please raise your cards in the air. And put them down. All opposed? The article passes by a 2/3 majority. It's not unanimous. That brings us to Article 24, which is a citizen's petition regarding the property at 63 Main Street. Lead petitioner Ellen Hardy will make the motion and the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon. I would like to present the town meeting the motion under Article 24, using the wording that appears in your motion sheet, with the exception of the last phrase, which says, "or act in relation thereto." That was part of the article for legal purposes. It does not need to be part of the motion. So the motion is all the wording as in the cranberry sheet, minus the phrase, "or act in relation thereto."
It's a cherry charge sheet. But is there a second?
Cherry.
Is there a second to that motion?
Thank you. 63 Main Street is the building to the right of Road and Bush Community Center. Waking up that March 2016 morning to learn of the fire at the Adams 1893 home at 63 Main Street was devastating for all of Westford. Blessedly, there were no injuries to the family members in the house at the time, but the attic and the roof were gone. For the next 2.5 years, the owner chose not to begin repairs or respond to numerous calls, including from myself, offering help getting the house back to its original beauty. But the owner did respond to the town manager's phone call in the fall of 2018. And she agreed to accept bids for the sale of 63 Main Street. The town's bid on that building was accepted by the owner, and you and I as voters were asked at the 2018 October town meeting to spend $700,000 to buy the property and to provide the funds so the house could be cleaned, dried, and a temporary roof added to prevent future water damage. I enthusiastically voted aye at that town meeting because I knew that 63 Main Street is one of the homes included as a contributing property in Westford Center's National Historic District, which was established in 2003. And I anticipated that the selectmen would immediately find a new owner to live in and to love this historic home. Instead, the selectmen appointed a task force, and that group did a sterling job of learning about the history of the Cameron property, of sharing what they learned with residents, and of creating a survey asking you and me what we wanted the property to be. The results of that survey were given to the Select Board 1 year ago. Of the 10 options on the survey, only one received a majority. 54.2% agreed that the option to, quote, sell this property as a single-family residence with an historic restriction, end quote. At town meeting, a majority passes the motion. So to me, that was strong direction to the Select Board, but the board took no action to sell the property as a single-family residence. So several voters, led by myself, but it wasn't easy to find a gathering, decided to take the initiative to bring it to you, to town meeting. And that is how Article 24 got on the warrant today, and we ask you to vote yes. The Select Board opposes this motion because they want to keep the town's options open. Specifically, they've discussed school administration offices or other town departments in beautiful 63 Main Street. These are exactly the options that the petitioners do not want pursued. Nor did those of you responding to the 63 Main Street Task Force survey. Only 34% voted for school administration offices there, and actually 45% marked disagree or strongly disagree with that option. And as for the option for town offices, over 50% marked disagree. Consider, too, that as we sit here this afternoon, the town has no plans, no permits, and no appropriation of money from this body to undertake any option that was presented for 63 Main Street other than to sell it. Even if town staff began work on this first thing tomorrow morning, it would be 2 to 3 years before restoration or renovation work would begin. You and I are homeowners, and we know that a house needs constant attention and care. In the 53 years my husband and I have been in town, we have owned 4 19th century homes in Westford Center. They need more care than most. The architect who helped the town renovate Road and Bush Community Center a few years ago has looked at 63 Main Street and given his opinion that in spite of the fire damage, it is structurally sound and could begin and has, with its unique architectural elements. These pictures are online. The beautiful woodwork, the stairway, the built-ins, that's all there. If work could begin by a new owner soon, the house is saved. But sitting empty for another 2 or 3 years while options are weighed will not help this beautiful home. The Finance Committee, unlike the Board of Selectmen, unanimously supports this motion, seeing a potential return of a large percentage of the town's $700,000 investment when we sell the property. They see an end to the annual $4,200 carrying costs that we're now paying on the house each year, and a return to the property to the tax rolls, which has been not true since we bought it. And this would once again bring in about $8,000 a year from the property taxes on 63 Main Street. That's a win-win. This is an historic home. It is an historic district, a district that we as the voters through the Historic Commission created. Let us honor that fact and vote yes to sell it to be a home again. I thank you.
Any questions or discussion of this article? I see someone approaching the microphone. No. Yes, in the center.
First off, thank you for your definition, Madam Moderator, of what moderation is. I'm one of the particles that lives at 62 Main Street. So, Ellen, thank you very much for bringing this as a warrant. So, in full transparency, I'm at 62 Main, which is directly across from this property. My wife and I have lived there for 22 years. We love being part of the historic district in Westford. We believe that that district offers a little bit of soul to Westford as who we are as people. We get to go to all the parades. We see all the functions on the common. We believe it drives a little bit of who we are in Westford. We're concerned that if we don't maintain that as a single-family home, we start to erode that in increments, and it's small increments. We believe that home provides a lot of value in terms of the look and feel and soul of Westford. So I'm in support of this. And Ellen, this is probably the only time we'll be able to say this, but I get to one-up you on one thing in life, and that's my house is built in 1792, so it's older than any of your 4. So I know what it takes to build and own these homes. It took us 10 years to restore this. I believe we should do that as a town, offer someone that opportunity to be a part of Westford and raise a family in that home. Thank you, and I vote yes for this.
And at the microphone to my right.
Leslie Thomas, 8A Old Colony Drive. I actually I was a member of the Task Force Study Committee. And I'd like to point out, from our point of view of looking at it, there were 13 members of the committee representing some town boards, and then a few other, like the person who just spoke, members at large. And from a historical point of view, this parcel of land of almost 3 acres abuts the town hall, the police station, all the way in the back, and goes all the way over to the Road and Bush Community Center. This town was founded, I think, 1792, and we have an opportunity to enhance our center of town from a historical point of view by combining these areas. And one of the options that, and I have this survey that we did, is the population 23,000 now, something like that? That we had 1,381 answers, so that's only 17% of the total town that answered. And this was not put out as a final option. These were just basically the committee wanted to try to survey the town and see what people were interested in doing with this property, or what we could do with this property to benefit everyone, and especially being in the center of town. I don't think on the committee, we never thought about not keeping the integrity and look of the house the way it was. And we looked at a lot of different options came up. And one of them was to sell it back as a single-family residence, maybe keeping some of the land for some parking. I don't know if this article, the petition had in it to keep the parking, to save a piece that abuts the town hall parking lot, to have more parking there. But there are other options of combining going all the way over to the Road and Bush from the back of town hall, of having some parking. There were a lot of other options thrown out and a lot of discussion, and that's what this survey was about. We were trying to create options and ideas of what people might like to see in town. And many of the others that got some percentages, not 50, but some of them were the year-round farmers market in the back and local craft space, community art studios, some other programs, a new home for the Westford Historical Society. There's a beautiful carriage house in back that's really in excellent condition that would provide a lot of space for that, but it was trying to keep it as part of the community. I do have a friend in Duxbury, and they took a historical house in the center and restored it, and the Historical Commission is on the second floor, or Historical Society, sorry, on the second floor, but they do have an office on the main floor. But they've restored the building, and they use it for, they do make some money from it because they use it for small events like luncheons or some small weddings or receptions. It gives the town an opportunity to also have a nice venue for some small events or receptions. And the whole idea was, when the selectmen disbanded the original task force, was that we were going to start a smaller, we asked for another year, a group of us to take time to try to plan and see what other ideas could happen there, and then bring it back to the town. And we didn't get that opportunity. Mainly, it happened, the COVID thing has stopped us dead in our tracks. And so that's where we're at. So we're asking that this is a little premature, that this option would still exist in the future, and that there also might be some other ways of using the property. And I have to say, our group was not in favor of a school administration building or a very municipal type of building, but using the property for the benefit of the townspeople. It is right in the center. We have so many town events around there, and it has a large piece of property, and we thought it could be for better use. So I'm asking that you vote no on this. Unfortunately, 3 other members of the group that were planning to come, one couldn't come because of some health reasons, and another one is away, and another one is...
Okay, Leslie, I need you to wrap up.
Okay, thank you.
The center microphone.
George Murray, 14 Haywood Road. I'm speaking against this motion. I have a couple of concerns. One is sort of beside the point from selling this as a residence, but the most important thing is that we don't have an adequate home for the school department headquarters. In most towns that I've been in or worked in, the school department headquarters are kind of the beacon, the headlight for the school system and for the pride that the community takes in the operation of its schools. And I sat a lot of cold nights down at Town Farm Road on the school committee, and then, we moved to the school department moved to the Millennial School, which was a big step up, but that building's on its last legs as well. This property would lend itself ideally to the location of the school department headquarters. There's plenty of space, there's plenty of parking, it's in the center of town. People don't have to explore the back roads of the town to find out where the school headquarters are. It's in the center saying, we love our schools and we're proud of our school system, and this building and this headquarters is one of the proofs of that. Now, there are a lot of other possible uses for the building, I recognize that. But the biggest concern that I have about how we got to this point was the committee that was studying this took an informal survey and found the results of their survey being cast as kind of in cement what the results had to be for the disposition of that building. And to my knowledge, there was no effort to ascertain how many of the survey respondents were Westford residents, how many of the survey responders may have voted 5 times, 10 times, or 15 times. It's just not a valid survey. Its purpose was met for what the committee wanted, and that is, let's find out what's out there in terms of ideas for what we could do with this. And they came up with a really big range of ideas, and I think that's super. But to put all our eggs in the basket of saying, we got to sell this because, I don't know how many decimal points you quoted, Helen, but a big percentage of the respondents, if they were valid respondents, said that we ought to sell it as a private home. If the town decides to go ahead and sell it and redevelop it as a private home, I will be very happy with that because it's a beautiful home and it will continue to be a beautiful landmark in the center of the town. But we will never have an opportunity, in my view, to come up with a piece of property and a location and a building that is so well suited for the needs of the school department headquarters. I don't believe we'll find one. And I'm speaking as someone who spent a lot of time in the last 2 years looking for land in Westford. So I would urge you to vote against this, and I would also urge the town fathers to see if we can't pick up the pace a little bit on the disposition of this, because I don't want to see it sitting there for 2 or 3 more years either. Thank you.
Art, is there someone at the microphone at the left? Yes. Yes.
Rose O'Donnell, 8 Sassafras Road in Westford. I have a couple of comments and then a question. First, I want to tell a very brief story. I have a niece who lived in Westford, was driving in Vermont with her husband through one of those little beautiful Vermont towns, and she said to him, "Wouldn't it be nice to live in a nice little town like this?" And then she said, "Oh, we do." And the reason we do is because of the center and the common and the beautiful houses along that way. So I think preserving this house as a residential house where someone will love it and take care of it will be really important. Now, my question is, the only thing I don't like about this article is that it says no more than 32 parking spaces. Because my biggest interest in this parcel is that we may actually get a chance to park our cars at Westford Center. Why can't it just say as many parking spaces as possible?
Do you want to would you like to respond to that?
There were, Rose, 3 different parking options that were drawn up by the town engineering department. The 32 was the least impact, and the petitioners happen to want the least impact. We certainly do admit that it would be nice to have more parking in the center, off-street parking. But there are 2 other, and so the plan that is referred to in the motion, where it refers to the plan, I can't find the number right now, but the one that's
12.
Yeah, that could certainly be amended to include, and I do have that with me actually, to have it be a different one, because this is the one dated December 12th titled Main Street, number 63, concept DWG. There are others, and if that was an amendment, you certainly could make that, and I will try and find those other plans. Well, selfishly, obviously, the only one I brought with me was the one with 32 parking spaces. I have that in front of me, but you know, it could be greater than, or you know, that could be negotiable. Certainly, it is an amendment that you could make and present to this meeting.
So I would like to make an amendment that it just say to the wordings, as many parking spaces as feasible, or wording such as that.
All right, can you just bring those few words up here, but I don't think we have
Or
to.
even just say that the parcels in the back be retained for parking.
And the Board of Selectmen can decide.
All right,
Is that?
can you bring that up
Do you
here?
have a pen?
I think we can find you a pen up here, Rose. So we have an amendment. Is there a second to that amendment? So we have an amendment to Article 24 requesting that where it says to accommodate not more than 32 parking spaces, we're changing the wording to say to accommodate parking as feasible.
Just period. Was that your? Yeah, parking period.
So the amendment, as presented, now changes the final lines of the article to say, of the motion to say, and that a portion of the property contiguous to the town hall parking lot be retained to accommodate parking or act in relation thereto.
That's not part of the motion, Angela. That was part of the article. I deleted that when I made the main motion. Those last 5 words are not part of the motion.
I'm sorry, Ellen. Cross off or act in relation thereto. But everything else that I said goes, and that portion of the property contiguous to the town hall parking lot be retained to accommodate parking. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Yep.
Hi.
What's your point of order?
My name is Kathleen Mollament. I'm on Timberley Lane. We've been here since 1980, and that parcel is beautiful. Having 8 grandchildren in various parts of the country, as a grandmother and as a mom, again, that house is beautiful. If it's going to be sold, I would imagine there'll be little children running around there. I can't imagine, as a grandmother and a mother, wanting a huge parking lot in the back, perhaps one that goes from the police station to Rodenbush. That would not be a high selling point for a gorgeous place like that, as far as I'm concerned. It would be a safety issue and whatnot. So I'm concerned that by opening the explanation of the use for the property to more than 32, that would open it up to a huge parking lot, which would be 1, unsightly, and 2, unsafe, if you're trying to promote that particular gorgeous piece of property to a family that probably will have children. Thank you.
Is anyone else want to speak to the amendment? No? Okay.
I would hope that that amendment would be clarified and adjusted.
The amendment is what it is.
No, the motion that you were trying to promote as far as something larger than 32 spaces, I didn't think that had been decided upon yet.
No, we're discussing the amendment which changes the wording about 32 spaces simply to say that the town hall parking lot be retained to accommodate parking. That's the motion
Right.
on the floor right now.
My only concern is that leaving it as broad as that would
Yeah,
expand it.
I think you stated your concern. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to the amendment? Yes.
Paul Fossbender, 14 Texas Road. That brings up the point that striking those words also strikes out the reference to a particular plan, which defines where the back boundary would be for the parking area that we retain. So I'll leave it up to the experts to determine whether this needs to be more specific in that regard or not.
Paul, were you making another motion to amend? We need to discuss and vote on this motion, but you can make another motion to amend.
No, I'm asking a question of the experts, maybe people from the planning board or somewhere who deal in things like this regularly. Is this motion specific enough, or do we need to specify how much land we reserve for parking, independent of how many spaces it is?
Okay. Town Council John Giorgio.
Madam Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, in order to sell this land, the town's going to have to issue a request for proposals that will specify the amount of land that's going to be conveyed. And that decision will be up to, if you eliminate the 32 space reference and just say reserved for parking, that decision would be within the discretion of the select board when they approve the RFP for issuance.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak to the amendment? Beth?
Beth Morrison, 10 Kelly Road. I speak in support of this amendment. It's actually why I came up earlier, so thank you for beating me to it. I've struggled with this a little bit. I initially did not support this in the FinCom, and then came around to supporting it due to the issues we're having with COVID and the budgetary restraints that we currently have in the town level. So my one issue was the parking, and I feel like this amendment does free up some the Board of Selectmen to make that determination about what parking would be best for the town, because I do feel like we do need more parking in the town center. And so I support this amendment because I think it does give us some flexibility to determine how much parking, and that will be determined by the Board of Selectmen in open meetings, so people could attend those meetings and share their concerns in those meetings. Thank you.
If anybody else at the microphones wants to speak to the amendment, please raise your hand. All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the amendment. We're voting on the wording change that eliminates the 32 parking spaces and the reference to the plan and changes it to generally say parking. All those in favor of amending the motion that way, please raise your cards in the air. Put them down, please. All those opposed? The amendment passes by a majority. Back to the main motion. Center microphone.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Marilyn Frank, 6 Chamberlain Road, and I'm speaking in favor of this new motion that we have before us. As I told you earlier, I've been in town 51 years, and the center has always been beautiful to me, just as the other areas of NAB and the other areas in Westford have been. When Liz Adams' husband died, my heart broke, because I believe he was in his 40s. When Liz moved out of Westford, I understood. When the house burned, I cried. I believe that we need to keep the center exactly as we can, the closest to where it is now, and I believe that in this instance, we should sell the house to a person who can take care of it. The building has been left too many years. I think that was what is before you. Assist the town at the same time as keeping Westford the way it should be. I am not in agreement with George. I love him dearly. He has worked very hard for the school committee, but we will find another place for where we need to put the building for schools. We found a place for the police department. We found a place for highway. We found a place for all the schools that have been built, and we will find a place. I ask everyone to join me in voting for this motion. Thank you.
Microphone to my right.
Paul Fossbender, Texas Road. I'm speaking in favor of this as well. I believe that numerous alternatives have been discussed at the Board of Selectmen and other committee meetings, not necessarily down to the specific level, but during the discussions, comments were made, like I believe an architect was quoted as, it will cost a lot of money to make this a municipal building. It turns out from my discussions with Paul Fox about the amenities building in June, the requirements for a town are much different than the requirements for a commercial enterprise or a residential enterprise. So someone redeveloping this for residential use won't have to pay a lot of the costs, won't have to meet a lot of the standards that would have to be put into the building were it to be for town use. Also, should we go forward with putting this to town use, as was mentioned, it will require a lot of funds over many years, and we have a lot of other things in the hopper, such as the library and a number of other things. Finally, I saw the assessor's report in the preparation package, and basically the comment was made that because taking land for the parking off the back of the property will have minimal impact on the assessed valuation of the property. So basically, the potential tax revenue won't go down to the town based on us taking some of the land. So as a taxpayer, this has got to be one of my favorite warrant items of all time from a cost-benefit point of view, and I really hope we pass this.
The microphone to my left.
John Cunningham, 4 Butternut Road. I'm in favor of this article for a couple of reasons. One of them is that we've been bouncing the school committee or school department has been mentioned as being an occupant. We bounce them around all over town, and I think they need a newer facility than this. And if we try to alter it, we're going to have to add to it. 21 August 2018 review of the school space requirements means the school department would need between 16,000 and 19,000 square feet for an adequate headquarters. And you can envision having this small house, I mean, it's not a real small house, but adding significant more space to that. So in view of that, I'm for this article.
And in the center, Eric.
Yes, Madam Moderator, I'm puzzled by the force and effect of the motion.
Eric, can you tell us who you are?
Yes, I am Eric Kintner, 14 Village View Road. And as I say, I'm puzzled by the force and effect of the motion that we're looking at. The motion authorizes the Board of Selectmen, who already have control of this property, as I understand it. It authorizes but does not require them to act in the manner stated in the motion. It almost reads as if the motion is little more than a resolution asking the Board of Selectmen rather than making any real progress.
Ellen, would you like to answer that?
I will defer to council, but I will say that as powerful as this body is, I don't believe we have the authority to mandate the selectmen sell this building. I'll ask the moderator if perhaps he could have council confirm or deny that. But I think that this is as much strength in his teeth as we can put in. But to me, with this body, when you say yes, I hope the selectmen listen. But maybe you should find out.
I don't think that requires anything further.
Well, I mean, if I'm incorrect, I want to.
Okay. The question is that correct?
Madam Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, I agree with the former moderator.
The microphone to my right. And we won't be taking any more voters except the two that are up there now.
Okay, this is Kathy Lynch on Rush Road. I was going to ask to move the question. I think we've debated this long enough.
We have one voter who's been waiting a long time. Can we let her speak, please?
Okay, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Edith Jo can fly 3 Fieldstone Drive, Bada Moderator. I stand in complete support of this motion. And while I acknowledge and understand the need for a school administrative building, I really don't think this is it. The concept of a landmark, to me, is completely distinct from the need for historical preservation that is inherent to this very special property. One of the reasons why my family even moved to Westford was because of the very special nature of this town, its history, and the people's deep understanding of the lens of democracy and history of this place. And in my personal opinion, this therefore needs to retain the special status that it's always held as a single-family home. So I would just like to, iterate the complete support that I have for this motion.
Thank you. All right, we'll call for the vote. If you are in favor of the petition, sorry, is there a point of order?
No, but I was waiting here too with the others. I have one more question.
Okay.
So thank you. It's Christy Bates, 23 Pierce Avenue. I would just like to hear from the select board. They voted unanimously against this, and I think it's important that we find out their reasoning why before we take this vote. Thank you.
Andrea Perna-Sweet, who's dressed for the evening now.
Thank you. The select board unanimously voted not to support this for really just a very simple reason, which is, again, we have so many things in play here within the center of town, within our buildings, within our needs, that we wanted to keep all of our options open for a little bit longer. To see exactly if this is the road we want to pursue and if we really do want to sell this as a single-family home. So again, it was simply to continue to keep options open while we at least the board takes a breath to determine the future of the center of town.
All right. We'll take the vote now. If you are in favor of the motion and the petition regarding the property at 63 Main Street, I'm going to ask you to raise your cards. All right, put them down. Those opposed? The motion passes. Although it says the majority vote is required in your book, it requires a 2/3. That was definitely a 2/3 vote. It passes by 2/3. All right. Article 25. I have a motion that the town authorize the select board to petition for permission to disperse funds it currently holds to the owners of the lots along Rome Drive extension. Is there a second to that motion? Andrea Perna-Sweet.
Thank you. So very briefly and historically, the developer who built Rome Drive extension went bankrupt in the middle of the development, and the road was never finished. The planning board at that time, and I was a member of the planning board, went to the bankruptcy court, filed a claim against the developer, and we actually prevailed. So we obtained approximately, I think, about $45,000 in funding back from the developer that was sent back into our general fund. And that money money has been sitting there since probably about 9 or 10 years now. Meanwhile, the residents of Rome Drive Extension basically got together and they paid for the improvements to their roadway, and their roadway has been accepted as a public roadway here in Westford. At the time that the planning board made its decision to go after funds from the developer, it was always with the intent that any funds that we were able to realize would be returned to the residents at such a time to help them finish off the roadway here. So the purpose of this, and we have been advised by council that the only way we can release these funds to the residents who paid for these improvements is to file a petition with the state legislature. So we are asking this body to permit us to file that petition with the state legislature. So if it does allow it, we can then release these funds back to the residents who actually paid for the improvement of their roadway.
Are there any questions or comments?
Janice Ferguson, 15 Rome Drive. Thank you, Andrea, for the summary of the history.
Janice, can you just move a little closer to the mic?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Andrea, for the summary of the history. I want to add to that we watched with great interest as the town sued the developer and as the town received those funds. After the town received those funds, we did in fact ask the town to use those funds to complete the road, and for the additional money that it would cost to use the betterment process to have the residents pay for the excess that it would cost. The town chose not to do that. They asked us to finish the road. So we did go ahead and do that. The road was disintegrating. We really had no choice. We worked with the town to make sure that we finished the road in a way that the town wanted to see it finished, and we had the town accept the road at the end of that process. And we are very happy with the collaboration we had with the town for that. We are now looking, we spent in excess of $100,000 to finish the road. There are 9 families on that road. So we are now asking the town to reimburse us for the money that the town received from the developer for the purposes of finishing the road. I ask you to vote yes. Thank you.
And I see another, is there another comment?
One second.
Okay, all right. All those in favor of the motion? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to have some clarification on the amount that was mentioned. It was 45, but I believe the amount is 58,000.
Jeff Morissette?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I don't have the exact amount to the penny, but when we checked on this matter several months ago, there was just over $58,000 or so. It was below 59, more than 58.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. All those in favor of authorizing the Select Board to petition for permission to disperse these funds, please raise your cards in the air. Put them down. All opposed, please raise your cards in the air. The motion passes unanimously. The business of this special town meeting being concluded, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, Jody Ross, Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Before we adjourn, could we just show our appreciation for our brand new moderator who did a fantastic job?
Thank you for making it easy. All in favor, is there a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor, raise your cards. Here we go. We're adjourned.